Hello, welcome everybody. This is Neil with Portal to Ascension. So good to be here with you all. And hello to everybody, not only on the YouTube channel, but also on the podcast. And for those of you who are not on the podcast, we are on iTunes, Spotify, Amazon, and like 10 other podcast platforms. So you could probably find us. And we're actually cultivating and curating a lot of content now specifically for the podcast, whereas before, we were just taking clips of different conferences and putting it there. So you really will get something kind of unique from attending the podcast. Not only will you be able to hear audio only for some of these interviews we're doing, but you'll also get to hear actual full podcast expressions and panels and everything. So today I'm excited because I am going to be introducing you to someone who I've only corresponded via email over, I think it's been quite a few months that we've corresponded back and forth. And she reached out to me because I believe Kathleen attended a William Henry event and reached out to me and said, I share a lot of information, in alignment with what you're doing at Portal to Ascension. Would really like the opportunity to come and share what I have. And we've kind of been going back and forth trying to figure out a moment in order to introduce her to the platform. So this is cool because this is very unique, since I am literally speaking and seeing Kathleen for the first time in person, technically in person. So you're going to get a unique experience where I'm actually going to be getting to know her alongside all of you. And I do have her bio up here, but we're going to bring on Kathleen in just a moment, and you can see her already and have her kind of introduce herself. But some of the topics that I just wanted to kind of share with you that Kathleen gets into, more than topics, but the universal questions, I wanted to share this part from her homepage, which is an incredible website, by the way. It's pureenergylady.wixsite.com. And on this page, on the beginning, it kind of says, I would say these are probably some of the universal questions that inspire her to do all the work that we're going to kind of be sharing today that she really does. And it's completely in alignment with Portal to Ascension. Some of these are in our mission statement too. What is the nature of reality? Who are we? Do our thoughts help create the reality we experience? Are there tools and techniques we can learn that can help us quiet our minds and find inner peace? Can we choose to create a more compassionate world? What is consciousness? Can we move our awareness to some place outside of our physical body in current time and gather information? Are animals sentient? Do they know what is going on, and do they have emotions? Are we all really interconnected at some deep unseen level? And these are really profound questions that really fuel what we're doing here at Portal to Ascension. So I'm really excited, Kathleen, to meet you officially here and to bring you onto the platform. So welcome.
Thank you so much. And that is why I reached out to you, Neil, because I really felt we're so aligned in what's driving us. And we really do want to help others open up to these questions and explore them with other people.
Yeah, exactly. And, a lot of people do reach out to me, and unfortunately, I'm not able to have everybody on and research everyone. But when you reached out to me, I got a chance to just open up your website right there, and you have it really laid out extremely well, right? Your topic area and everything. So it was almost like a resume where I could just see everything immediately that you were into. So I said yes, like almost immediately, just because I saw that it was in alignment and you really presented it well. But let's start with this. Why don't you introduce yourself to everybody in the community and kind of just share with myself and everybody your journey to this awareness?
Okay, that's great. Well, I would say my journey really kick-started, let's say, when I went for my master's degree in psychological counseling. I went out to the University of Notre Dame, and I'd always been very empathic. I could really feel people's emotions. But when I went for my master's degree, I had like an internship. So I had real clients for the first time face to face. And I realized as I was speaking with them that I knew things about them. I didn't know how I knew it. I knew, like, if they were having a problem now, that maybe something when they were younger, and sometimes I could even get the exact age, that is sort of what triggered, as life went on, why they were having this particular issue right now. And I just realized that I really knew a lot about them. And I would go to my professors, and they were great. And they said, Kathleen, you're galloping, hold off. And they wanted me to go, week after week and have the people come to the realizations themselves. But I was like, can I just ask, did something happen when you were this age? And, eventually they let me sort of do that. But what I realized is I was very, very intuitive. And I thought, I can't really do regular counseling because I want to bring up issues and, specifically go to different times as opposed to allowing them. So I graduated with my degree, and instead of getting a job in counseling, I got a whole bunch of other different types of jobs, but I started studying metaphysics, all different kinds of spiritual disciplines, theosophy, different kinds of, the teachings of Hermes. I mean, I started getting into all this because I wanted to understand what was going on with me. Then
And how long ago was this? Can you tell me again what age?
It'll show my age. It was 1982 and 1983.
Okay.
So I've been into this for a long time. That was my master's. And then I waited about 7 or 8 years, and I went back for my doctoral degree. And that's when I met my wonderful husband, Wes, who was a fellow student with me. I went for educational psychology because they had one of the only programs in what's called transpersonal psychology as a specialty. Transpersonal psychology is not that well known. It's the only aspect of psychology that goes into a more spiritual dimension, which of course has always been my true interest. And so I got to specialize in that. And when my husband and I graduated with our doctorates, again, I decided I was teaching part-time. I was teaching at the college level, psychology, educational psychology, developmental psychology, but I didn't believe everything that was in the textbooks. The way they kind of said things and how people evolve and grow and, because of my whole background, I was thinking, no, there's more to it than this. God bless them, but you read all about cognitive psychology and they don't mention consciousness, so I felt like I couldn't go that route either. So what I started to do was develop my own courses. And so I've been teaching my own courses over this time, just small. I teach now at the local community colleges. I teach at wellness centers, libraries, and now on Zoom. And then I also do oracle cards readings because I wanted to incorporate my intuitive skills with my counseling skills. So I actually developed my own deck of oracle cards, and I use that to give readings.
Beautiful. So, the term consciousness is definitely, obviously everything is consciousness, and there's levels of awareness that are conscious awareness. But, in the 80s and compared to now, it wasn't utilized as much, right? And so what was there a spark? Because you kind of told us what happened when you were in school, and then you started kind of like having more questions there. But what was it that even brought you to the term consciousness? Was there were you brought up religiously? Did you have a kind of an awakening that led you to this, or what was it? And maybe you can also add, what is consciousness as well?
Okay, sure. Okay. To me, consciousness is everything. It is everything. God is consciousness. God is consciousness, and we are all parts of that. So to me, when I ask that question on my website, are animals sentient? That's really just to get people wondering about it. But for me, there's absolutely no doubt that everything, even my pen, has some form of consciousness in it. It just doesn't all speak English, because everything's a part of God. And so for me, everything has that essence, and it's kind of like how consciousness is filtered through whatever the physical is that you get to experience that way. But yes, I've always been, I grew up Catholic. I don't mock it at all. It was a really solid, excellent foundation for me. In fact, I feel like I have, I have a special relationship with Mary. I feel like a disciple of her.
Yeah.
That's always been special for me. And so because of that, even from a very, very young age, I have pictures of myself praying when I was a toddler. So that's always been, so I've always had, I don't know, an awareness
Mhm.
of the sacred in everything. So it really, I can't say, I mean, I've had a lot of cool experiences,
Mhm.
but I can't say that it started at one moment. It was like I've always been aware that that Mary's there, that she guides me, that God is everything, you know, these kinds of things. But it was wonderful to study the Hermetic texts and to study theosophy and to study these other readings that I'm like, oh my gosh, they agree with me, you know, and so I loved being able, and that's what I do with my classes. I have such a wide breadth of interest, and I synthesize all of these things that I've read and I've studied over time, and I bring them all into my classes. And so it's not just I'm giving people my own belief system, but I'm saying this author said this, you know, this information can come from here. And so that people can go and they can study on their own, those kinds of things.
Mhm. So when did, just to to speak just a little bit more about consciousness before we move on here, when did the term consciousness come to you?
That's a good question. That was later. It was later. It was when it was starting to get into the culture. I
Mhm.
think it wasn't early on. It was more like, I think I thought of, I always, in catechism, you probably don't know, if you go to Catholic school, you get like a little book when you're
Mhm.
in grade school, and it's called a catechism. And it was like the Baltimore Catechism. And in that, it's like, who is God? And the answer is, God is everything.
Mm.
Where is God? God is everywhere. And those concepts are it for me.
Mhm.
And that I learned that in grammar school, and that just stayed with me. But by the time I got older, I'm sorry I can't even answer you, Neil, because
No, you're doing
I don't
perfectly.
I don't know where the term consciousness came to
Yeah.
my consciousness. You know, I was there when bookstores started putting metaphysical
Mhm.
sections in. I was in there reading those books, and so it just it came
It
into
was it was just an evolution, right? Like, because
it.
you had already read the Hermetic text at this point.
No, again, I think I read those in even in the 2000s. Like,
Okay.
it wasn't early on.
So the
Yeah.
reason why I'm asking is I'm very interested in people's process of waking up, right? So it looks like you were definitely raised in Catholicism, but you weren't indoctrinated to the point where you were limited by it. You know, you were
Never.
open to, because all religion has a lot of truth in it, and then there's a
Yeah.
bunch of man-made stuff too, literally man-made stuff. And just by a little bit of research, you can even dissect what was added later. And you were more into the spiritual element of it all that kept you open enough to be open to receiving the other information later in life, it seems,
That's
right?
right. That's right.
Mm-hmm.
And I just, on a very, very personal note, I left calling myself Catholic. I left the whole church, um, you know, gradually. But when I went to get married, my husband grew up in a Protestant church, and
Mm-hmm.
we weren't going to church. We were at school, and I was trying to get a priest to marry us. And I finally found, and they didn't want to because we hadn't belonged to a church and we didn't pay the money on
Mm-hmm.
Sundays, you know, and so I was having a very hard time. And finally, I found somebody, but they said that I had to sign a piece of paper that said I would raise my children Catholic. And I said,
Wow.
I'm not going to do that. My husband's Protestant, and I have like Hindu beliefs, I have Buddhist beliefs, you know.
Right,
By
right.
that time I've incorporated, I'm spiritual, you know. And so I said, that's it, you know, sorry, you know, man-made rules are not for me anymore. And so now I don't, I'm just a spiritual person.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. So there are many topics, as I said earlier, that you speak on, from the teachings of Hermes to UFOs and UAPs,
Yeah.
the existence of UFOs, recent evidence, conscious communication relationships, really the whole spectrum of what it means. Like, it's not just about UFOs and the fact that we're having these sightings, but the spiritual connection to it, and then also how that connects to us doing the inner work, that we're not even going to really be able to be the caretakers of this world that we know is possible with open communication, the awareness of UFOs, unless we do the inner work. And I would think that conscious communication, our relationships, is definitely a part of that, right? But there's something that you have here in your site, and it's the rainbow light body and how it connects to UFOs. So can you speak on that a little bit?
Yes. Well, one of the other reasons I really wanted to talk to you, Neil, is because you love William Henry, like I love William Henry. He's so important. I would say he's one of my main teachers. And I think he's a very, very special being. I think he's a very high being, in this body that he has now. And so I'll go all the way back to, I'm back in my doctoral program. My husband and I graduate and we get married, and we're sitting in front of a TV in the year 2000, and it's the Summer Olympics. And my husband loves the Olympics, and we're watching the opening ceremony, and it's in Sydney, Australia at that time. And so here comes this art installation in the Olympics opening ceremony, and it's this huge head with the big eyes. And I was never interested in science fiction. I didn't know what a gray looked like. I didn't know what that meant, but it was this huge head with these big eyes. And the section of the opening ceremony was called The Awakening. How perfect. And so I saw this image and I said, oh my goodness, I have to pay attention to this. What is that? And after next couple of weeks, I looked it up. It was called a Wandjina. And this Sydney Olympics, well, they were in Sydney, Australia. And for them, the Aborigines had a devotion in some ways to these cave paintings of the Wandjina head. It was like a gray head that they had, and they were dated back, I don't know, to 30,000 years sometimes in these caves. So I knew that was very important for me. That was an aha. Well, only a few months later, my husband and I moved to the Hudson Valley of New York, which happens to be a hotspot for UFO activity. And because of my counseling and intuitive, people would come up to me, I'd be meeting people, and they would be telling me about their UFO experiences. And my husband and I joined a support group that met every month, and people from all over would come and they would tell their experiences because they couldn't really tell it to their family or friends. They'd get laughed at or mocked, or people didn't want to hear what they had to say. So I would be there with my husband and a few other people, and we would listen to the people that would come every month and tell these amazing stories of their experiences. So over time, this was for a couple years, I knew that something very genuine was happening. Nobody really understood what it was, but these people were having real experiences. So I started going to conferences and exploring this, and, it became an interest of mine. Well, when William Henry started talking about the rainbow light body, I felt that there was something important about that in relationship to the UFO phenomena. And then a book came out a couple of years ago. I think it was written in 2016 by a Father Francis V. Tiso, Tiso. And the book is called The Rainbow Body and Resurrection. Father Tiso, he's graduated Cornell, Harvard, Columbia, Union Theological Seminary. He has a PhD in Buddhist studies. So even though he's a New Yorker and he's very smart, he was really he's led people to go on different expeditions to India, Nepal, Tibet, and he speaks, I think, 7 languages. Well, he was tasked by his spiritual advisor to go to Tibet and to talk to these disciples of a monk that supposedly attained his own rainbow body. And I will describe that in a minute, his own rainbow body in 1998. So something very current.
Huh.
And so he went, and sure enough, he talked to this, his name was Khenpo A. Chow. He was a Galupa, and I may be mispronouncing this. He was a Galupa monk within a Tibetan Buddhism, and he died at the age of 81 in 1998. His disciples realized, his students realized that something important was going on, because at the time of his death, there were rainbows over the place that he died, but there were also weird colored lights in rainbow color, but not like an arc, that were all around. There was beautiful music, and nobody could tell where it was coming from. There was all these different signs that someone had attained the rainbow body. Well, I should back up and say that within this particular sect or division of Tibetan Buddhism, and I'm not going to pronounce this correctly, it's called the Nyingma. It's the oldest school of the different sects of Tibetan Buddhism. There is what's called the Great Perfection Teachings. And these teachings are there so that advanced human beings can do these practices so that at the time of death, this can happen. And what happened was they put a cloth over the monk's body, and after 7 days, no body was left. The body had shrunk and then disappeared completely and transformed into light. During this period, some of the disciples actually felt a little tug on their shoulder and heard the voice of Khenpo Chow telling them, meditate well, practice well. Other people had other different experiences of him, that he was still alive, and actually so much so that they could physically feel his presence. And so this book explores these teachings from a Western viewpoint that has been handed down in the Tibetan teachings. And again, the interesting thing, Neil, and William Henry adds this piece, that, and it's within the Tibetan teachings as well, that these teachings are taught in 12 different solar systems or star systems other than our own. So I believe that these are teachings by extraterrestrials, let's say, that are potentially like our cousins. Other beings have bodies that are somewhat similar to maybe the energetic makeup of ours, maybe like chakras or something like that. And that on other planets, these beings have attained their rainbow or light body. And I believe that some of the orbs that people see in relation to the UFO phenomena are not craft, but maybe beings that have attained their own light bodies. And maybe they are from different places, but they're still coming here to help us evolve spiritually so that we can do this. That was a lot, but
no, that's very interesting because, we have 13, right? You just said 12 in our solar system, so the number 13. When I first woke up, 2000, 2001, I was listening to Nassim Haramein. He was the first person I listened to. And he was doing this whole thing on the Ark of the Covenant and possibly being a 0-point energy device inside of it. And that, and he said something about scriptures that talk about 13 planetary systems that exist that have third-dimensional life like us, right?
That's the same thing, isn't it?
Yeah. And then with the black hole, the singularity, which is the 0-point technology, you have 12 points of singularity within the one black hole, which equals 13. So there's a lot of connections there. And then obviously we have Jesus, the 12 apostles, and the one. So it's almost like these numbers, these numerologies, we're all really talking about our connection to the cosmos, which could be these 13 planets, right?
That's
That
what I
have
think.
similar work with us. Yeah.
That's what I think. And I think Jesus was potentially one of these other beings, because who was Jesus's father? We don't know who Jesus's father was.
Oh, you mean, yeah. You mean like because he was Miraculous Conception?
Virginally, yeah.
Yeah.
We know his mother was Mary.
Yeah.
But what was the DNA of his father?
Yeah.
Maybe it was one of these other beings from one of these other solar systems that came here and created a being, Jesus, who could hold the energy, who could raise his energy to such a point that at the time of his death, he too attained his light body. And that's part of what I teach, that I believe Jesus and Padme Sambhava and Jesus's mother Mary, within Catholicism, if you don't know, Neil, Mary is said to have gone through an assumption, which is essentially the same thing as attaining her light body or a resurrection as well.
Right. So we did a whole presentation on Miraculous Conception with Margaret Rigoloso, right?
Oh.
And she's a Greek scholar and a bunch of different things, but she went through she has a whole entire scholarly paper on tens of different miraculous virgin births that occurred. And then the number one that she has in there is just Jesus's birth. And she shows evidence that there was a high priestess order in which they trained women in order to basically be able to cultivate virgin births. And what they would do is, she, in her presentation, she didn't go through all the rituals, but in her writing, she does. But what I got from it, and I asked her and she agreed, is they would step into some sort of frequency vibration that the womb is a portal for the soul. It's undeniable that if we have souls, the womb is a portal for it, and almost like a wormhole into this dimension. So what they were doing is they were actually tapping into a Pleiadian order. And so she gives evidence to suggest that these miraculous births were creating something in order to connect to a certain frequency within the Pleiades, possibly pulling highly advanced souls from the Pleiades. That's just one of the theories out there. I just got introduced pretty recently. But if you look at ancient history, Pythagoras also had a virgin birth. He was also known as the son of God and the sun god himself. Yes. And his mother had, his mother and Apollo basically got together and gave birth to him. And in the Greek text, it actually says that he was an incarnation from the Pleiades.
I didn't know that.
Which connects to Jesus, because a lot of the Pythagorean information actually was taken and implemented into the clergy, into the Freemasons and the Knights Templar order. So there's a lot of, crossover there.
Yes. And just add one more. Within the Tibetan teachings, they say that the teachings there's a story. What they believe is there's a person named Garab Dorji, and he's supposed to be the very first human that got the teachings from the realm of the Buddhas, and he had a virgin birth.
Interesting. Yeah. So now connecting it, going back to the UFO connection, this is what I'm getting from this, because we have the light body, right? The rainbow light body, which would you say that's the Merkaba? Is that the same thing?
I would.
Okay.
Yes.
Right. And then there's a lot of channelers and information and even Egyptian texts and emerald tablets of Thoth that talk about the Merkaba being a vehicle that we can transport our consciousness without needing UFOs and craft.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
So you want to, I'm going to say some more on that, but go ahead and jump in right here.
No, you go ahead. Go ahead, because that's kind of the whole idea, that these are not some of them are not hard craft. So go ahead.
So our goal is supposed to be that we're eventually able to stop using external creations and start using our own creation to travel. And because ultimately everything is just one frequency experiencing itself infinitely. And once you can get to a level of consciousness that you can literally just go into your light body and just transfer your consciousness to another point, you don't have to travel the illusion of distance,
Exactly. That's the whole point of why I want to teach, these things, because I think that is human evolution. And as we know, we're in a special energetic field right now. I think more people can make more progress to that at this point in time than ever before, turning their bodies, heightening the vibration and making it into light. And maybe not this lifetime, but you can make great progress towards that right now with all the energies that surround us and are supporting us at this time.
Right.
And then you have more access, just like you're saying, to not this physical dimension, but you can go and live elsewhere.
Right, right. You know, are you familiar with Jim Self at all?
Oh, yes. Yes.
Okay, so he was another one that I watched literally right after Nassim Haramein in 2001. And so it was cool that I got introduced to this right at the beginning, because I watched a video on him talking about the Merkaba, right? And the Merkaba is a star tetrahedron shape basically around our body. And he said that what you need to do is get to a meditative state where you rotate your Merkaba, right, to 3/4 the speed of light. And when you do that, you enter simultaneous time, in which you're able to see all your incarnations simultaneously and consciously make shifts and changes within it, right? So I thought that's very interesting, because he's basically saying we can use our light body to transcend space-time, just like seconding everything that we're already saying here, transcend space-time and actually be able to be the creators of the timeline rather than not aware that we're creating the timeline. Does that make sense?
Yes, and I'm just going to go back to that Garab Dori, the teachings, the Tibetan teachings. His mother was the daughter of a king, and she gave up all her riches and she went to become a nun, and she practiced practices of purity of mind, body, and spirit. And she had a dream where a white-faced man, so some people could think of it like as an angel, came and touched her with a lance and a vase. And by the way, if you look at images of Mary when she was drawn like in the Middle Ages, a lot of times they'll show like her with a vase, and a lot of times the angel Gabriel will have some kind of lance with him too. But anyway, so this mother of Garab Dorji, she was touched by the lance and the vase, and at that moment she could see everything that happened in the past, present, and future at the same time. So I just want to say, what you're saying is in the Tibetan teachings of what is possible when you attain this kind of consciousness.
I love it when cool? Yeah, I love it when we can share information that validates each other. So, like all of this is so amazing, and, all the things that are happening in the cosmos and the universe and things that we can curate and cultivate. But what I really like and appreciate with what you do is that you also bring it very practical on the tools and techniques of this moment and what we can really do. And, I wrote an article some time ago for a magazine called "What Does Meditation Have to Do with UFO Disclosure?" Right? And it basically was a whole about like, well, we're not going to really be in this world, and we're not going to be able to accept this world if our consciousness is not at that level, and doing certain things would really assist us in getting there. There are some things that you have on your website here that I kind of want to go into a bit more, and especially when it comes to conscious communication in our relationships. So what can you share about the importance of conscious communication, and how does that look? Like, how can we even do that, especially when we are raised and a lot of us have traumas, we get triggers, we have baggage? What are some techniques that we can use in order to shed that, for lack of a better term, and start communicating consciously with not only just ourselves, but also with others?
Yeah, that's so important. And I like the terms that you use there, like you have baggage and you get triggered, because that's almost exactly like the kind of lane I'm going to go down here. Okay, so the idea is this, that we have, when we're centered, we have a state of consciousness that we're in. Now, a lot of people, if you don't think about it, you don't realize that you can come to a centered state and be in a certain state of consciousness. But this is what I'm helping people to do, to come to this realization and to experience this. So I do lead people through different meditations and stuff like that. But what happens is, just like you said, as we go through life, we start to react. I mean, that's what being a human being is about. So you have a different situation. It could be a person saying something to you. It could be, it could be anything at all. And we tend to react. And so when we react, we tend to go into a different, not centered, emotional and psychological state. It's literally an energetic state. So somebody says something to you and you get really mad, or something happens and you get kind of afraid. Actually, there's a great quote by Sophocles, who is a Greek playwright. He said, to the person who is afraid, everything rustles. And the point is that if you get moved into fear, you get blinders on. You're literally in an energetic state where everything that ever happened to you that made you feel fearful is all in that vibe. And that's all you can see. So your whole world becomes a fearful world because that's all that you see. Or when you get angry and you're mad at everybody, everybody's a jerk or whatever, that's all that you can see, because every other time you got mad, you're in that state. And so what you have to do is realize that you have these states that everybody has ones that they tend to go into more than others. Maybe you get into a state where you're over responsible or not responsible at all. I mean, there's the whole gamut of different emotional reactions you can have. But my point is that that's not really who you are. That is like just a side field, and literally an energetic field that your consciousness goes in. And when it's in that field, you can't make a good decision. You can't communicate with the person in front of you because you're only seeing it from that perspective. So you have to be aware that, and let me say in terms of relationships, that since you brought that up, the likelihood is if you're in a relationship for a while, you'll have a dance. And if the person goes into a certain state, even if they don't say anything, you can feel it and you might shift into your state. So they get angry and you retreat, and they want to come towards you and you retreat more. Well, that will go on and on like that. There are these two, and you'll never solve it if you're in those states, because those states don't know how else to be except that. So you have to realize this happens, and it's hard in the moment to say, oh my gosh, I'm in that state, I need to calm down. It's very difficult. So you may need to take some time, go for a walk, do something else, meditate, breathe, whatever it is, and then come back when you know you're centered to have conscious communication with the other, and they have to be centered. And that's when you can really say, look, I did this, I know you did this. And what I say, process it. You describe how you went there, where you went, and then you can say, oh, when I was little, this reminded me when, this happened to me. And you can really grow from this because you can explore things of why it happened in the first place. And you can forgive the other person because they're going to it because, well, it happened when they were little, and that, and so it's some really powerful work comes when I teach these kinds of things, to understand yourself better, to understand others better, to have more compassion for other people. It's very powerful work.
Definitely. And, I was going to say, you kind of mentioned it there, it takes two to do this, because you could be centered and willing to do the work, but if the other person isn't, and then sometimes if it's a relationship where you're like married or like dating or something, you may have to make a decision if it continues going on like that, where one is choosing to do the work and the other one isn't, right? But then in some situations with your family members and your parents, you can't even make a decision whether they're part of your life always, and this decision would be whether you want to be around that toxicity or not. But so what if only one person is willing to make the shift, and not in let's not say not a romantic relationship, but just say with family members? How do you stay centered? Because sometimes I've been in situations where I'm attempting to convey something and come from a place of inner peace, but my family member isn't. And then we just keep butting heads, and then we just kind of have to just not talk about it anymore, you know?
That's a good solution.
I guess, right?
I'm not saying that's bad.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you can agree to just not talk about it, if it's not a major thing, that is
Yeah.
where part of it might have to go. And then you find your like-minded people, elsewhere. But I grew up in a situation like that too, where like when I went back to my home situation, I would say to my husband, okay, like I would ask him for help. And I would say, let's set the boundaries here, because if things start to escalate, we need to leave. And I just needed to know that, because I would try as hard as I could to remain centered in a situation. But because it had a whole lifetime of flaring up into different things, it was more like I had to know when to leave. And what mostly happened is it got worse and I didn't leave because I didn't know it was going to get that bad. And so, but I just kept trying to say to my husband, okay, we know we're going to leave early. We have to have an out for it, like planned for that. But the best thing to do would be to, like you said, say to the person from your heart. The most you can speak from your heart without getting pulled in, the less likely they are to react very strongly. So it's helpful, even if you can stay centered. But with family, it is very, very difficult. And I don't know if there's any one great way except to not talk about it, to leave, to sometimes you can do this. You can pray ahead of time or set a visualization ahead of time, ask for spiritual help, angels, to go ahead of you and clear out the energy. You can do work like that, and that does work, so no real perfect always going to work thing with family. Though
No, that's good advice, because so having boundaries, so you set your boundaries for yourself, really, like if it gets to this level, because let's talk about politics, for example, right? Ideological differences. There are those that you just know with your family member, you just don't bring it up.
Yeah.
But then there's family members that will always bring it up because they need to prove a point, and so you got to set your boundaries. And that's just one example. And then you're going to know how far you'll take it when you're to the level of you being abused emotionally.
Yeah.
Right.
Yes.
And
sometimes you do have to leave the person totally,
right.
that if it's really that bad, or just call them and don't interact by face or whatever, you do have to set it so that you're not going back into that.
Yeah. And knowing also why, like say I'm the individual that wants to be a little confrontational with my parents because I'm frustrated about something, but I'm still feeling centered and it's something I want to communicate about. But knowing where that comes from is important. Is it a past trigger? Is it because of my upbringing that I'm using this individual isolated situation in order to impose onto them? Right? Like, what is the real intention for it? Is it just to get out anger? Because a lot of times I've sounded centered. I wanted to talk about things, but it was just because I wanted them to really know how upset I really was from the things that happened in the past.
Yeah, that's perfect. That's self-awareness. That's self-awareness. Now, sometimes the other important thing to know is when that kind of, let's say, little anger, little frustration is coming up, it's coming up for a really good reason. And that information does need to be expressed. You can't keep that all in, but you have to do it in a way that's centered, because like I said, if you bring that energy with you, they're going to go into their pattern of backing up or confronting you, whatever it is. So as much as possible, you have to stay here. So let me ask you this. The energy's in you so much that you need to express it. Can you write them a letter? Can you put it on tape? Can you do it in some way? Can you, if you really need to let them know something, a way other than you've been trying to express it that hasn't worked? Can you find another way to get it out? Or maybe you write about it ahead of time, write one of your beautiful poems, get it out of your system ahead of time so that when you do speak to them, it's less a lot because you've gotten the top off of it. So maybe you express it before you talk to them. There's many ways to try to get the point across. Sometimes people die and you've never said something to them. You can still say it to them, and get it out in these kinds of ways. You can visualize having a conversation ahead of time. So there's writing, there's putting it into a poem, and another way to express it. Doing something with your hands to at least express the energy of it, if not all the details of it, so that it gets out of you. And then when you are with that person, you won't be as emotional about it.
As a reactory trigger.
Yeah. Yes. Good.
Yeah.
Good word.
So, okay, so we're kind of on this track right now, so we might as well continue. And it really comes down to finding inner peace, because that's what centered is. Like inner peace doesn't have to be all the time, every time, but it could be in moments. Ultimately, if we all had inner peace all the time, the world would probably be a much better place. But what can we do? What are some tools and techniques that you can offer that can assist us really in creating that inner peace and that inner joy too? That just that joy that comes from within, rather than putting everything on the external reality having to give us the joy internally.
Yes. Within psychology, there is a theory called the theory of 8 multiple intelligences that was devised by a Harvard professor. And I learned it when I was in school studying psychology. And this theory has been used in education. And I love it so much that I use it in many different ways. I even created my own oracle cards kind of using this theory as a background. The idea is this: when I was younger, you took what was called an IQ test. And it was one test that you took one day out of your life, and you got one number. And that number was supposed to tell you how intelligent you are. And so this theory says that no, we don't just have one intelligence, we're smart or we're not. We have many capabilities. And so his name was Howard Gardner, and he divided it up into 8 different types of intelligence. So some of us are more auditory. We learn by listening, by hearing, okay? We're also good with words, with writing. I would put you in that category. Some of us are very visual. I'm very visual. I really remember things if I draw it out, if I scribble it, if I see it. If I hear somebody tell me their name, it goes in one ear and out the other. But I will remember how to get someplace, not by the names of the streets, because I make a left by that tree. I will remember visually. Some people learn best in a group situation. Some people learn best on their own, kind of privately. Some people are wonderful with music. Some people are wonderful with math. Nature is really important, actually, for probably most people. So there are these 8 different intelligences, and we all have all of them, but we have them in different strengths, depending on who we are, our upbringing, and things like that. So some of us can have access to a bunch of them. So what I teach is that if you get to know yourself from that perspective, there are tools and techniques that work best for people with that strength of intelligence. So for me, if I see a beautiful image, like I have paintings around here of Jesus or Mary, or, the things that I really relate to. And if I look at that will help me. They're icons, if I do guided visualization in my mind, because I'm very visual, that will help me calm down. For you, like I suggested before, you might write, because that's really a strength for you to bring you to your peace. For many people, nature is a big deal, and exercising and being outside and breathing in the wonderful air of the pine or whatever, that can help you bring your peace. If you're very much a math person, doing puzzles is great because it accesses your sort of logical, mathematical mind, and doing puzzles, sometimes even crocheting, because you're counting as you're sort of doing that. So I teach that you get to know yourself and kind of how you operate in the world, and then you choose the different techniques. And I can go over a whole bunch more, but those are some good examples of different techniques that you can use based on what it would help you personally achieve a sense of inner peace.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Because there are, some teachings out there that kind of just give a few different techniques. And what you're really getting into here is that there is no one size fits all for everybody. And then you get even more deeper with the psychology of it all, that we have different ways of learning and processing information, and those have their own specific techniques, right?
That's right. Yes.
And so, yeah, that's incredible. And so thank you very much, Kathleen. We're going to wrap it up here, but just before we go, like, is there anything else you want to share about, maybe something that you're up to now, something that you're excited about for this year, the energy of the moment, anything that you feel that we have in store for us in the months and years to come?
Well, like I said before, we really are in a special time and place. There really is a transition going on right now. And I would just say to everybody, part of the transition is going to be the breaking down, destruction of different institutions and different things that don't fit the new energy. Just be aware of that. It's okay, because we're going into something much higher, much brighter, much better, and you're going to start to see things falling apart and not working. Don't even, you might want to try to fix them, but what I would really suggest is going inside. How would you love it to be? What would be so fun for it to be? When you were a child, what did you love to do? How would you like to manifest that in the world? So we're at a place when we can create something new right now. There's so much energy to help us all create something new and bright and bigger. And so let's focus on that, how we can connect with each other. There's the power of like-minded people coming together. As much as you can, find those people in your life, talk with them, have conversations like I just had here with Neil. It's so wonderful. Talk about it like this, and we'll bring up the energy for everybody. And we might have little going down, but keep coming up, and know for sure in your heart that something wonderful is being birthed right now. And I just send my blessings out to everyone.
Beautifully said. And yep, that's exactly what I feel too, that institutions are going to are not serving us. We'll have to leave, and don't have fear about it, because we just can create something more beautiful, right? Yes. And that's what we're on our way to do right now. Yes. Kathleen, thank you so much. It's been beautiful speaking with you. And definitely, now that we've had this conversation, we've connected, we'll be everybody that's tuning in, you'll be seeing Kathleen on some events in the next few months, 2 years to come, because we have only really scratched the surface of what she shares. So thank you so much, Kathleen.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
My pleasure. All right, everybody. So this is Neil with Portal to Ascension. And just to let you know, once again, you can check out Kathleen's website, okay? pureenergylady.wixsite.com, pureenergylady.wixsite.com. Check out her topics, check out her upcoming events there, and, connect with her. And I'm definitely, I already have a list of her topics here with Portal to Ascension on my spreadsheet. And I have events coming up pretty soon. So we'll be talking, and you'll be seeing her around. And also check out our podcast. If you're on YouTube, go to Amazon, Spotify. And if you can, something I really need some help with, everybody, is that because I haven't really pushed the podcast, we don't have that many reviews on our podcast. And the more reviews you get, the more views you get on there. So if you can go to iTunes, Amazon, Spotify, and leave a review for us, that's going to just help this awareness get out to more people. And that's it for me. We're going to be going live much, much more than you've seen in the past, with many amazing people over the next few months. So stay tuned for that. Love you all. Have a beautiful night. Take care. Bye-bye.